The item 14, examination of international assistance requests. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Debonnet from the World Heritage Center to introduce the item. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You have two documents for this item, WHC 1236.com/14 and WHC 1236.com/inf14. Now, if you look at your working document 14, it is in three different parts. Under part one, a request is presented from Jordan, a request for international assistance, which was received on the 1st of February 2012 for examination by the World Heritage Committee. However, the request was revised mid-June for a lower amount of $30,000 following comments by the advisory bodies which were transmitted to the state party. Therefore, it now falls within the approval authority of the chairperson, and the renewed request is currently under review by the advisory bodies. As a result, no decision is now required from the World Heritage Committee. In part 2 of the document, you will find, in reply to decision 35-14, paragraph 3, the status of implementation of the international assistance request for the rainforest of the Atsinanana in Madagascar, which was approved by the committee in 2010 for $100,000. Finally, in the third part of your document, there is a set of proposals to improve the international assistance process, taking into account the increasing budgetary constraints, and also in an effort to implement certain recommendations of the evaluation of the global strategy by the external auditor. These proposals were discussed in detail by the working group on the operational guidelines, and the committee just before lunch adopted the changes in the operational guidelines relevant for this under item 13. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that the Secretariat is proposing a revised draft decision to reflect, on the one hand, that the international assistance request from Jordan was revised and doesn't need a decision by the committee, and on the other hand, that all the parts of the original draft decision which pertain to the revision of the operational guidelines were actually now included in the decision on item 13 adopted this morning. If I can have the next slide, please. I would also like to draw your attention to the information document in point 14, which shows the final status of the international assistance budget for 2010-2011, the previous biennium, as well as the current status for the current biennium 2012-2013. Since the elaboration of the document, 4 additional requests have been approved, one from the Central African Republic, one from Indonesia, one from Solomon Islands, and one from Costa Rica, bringing the number of approved requests to 13, and the amount currently approved under international assistance to $320,453 United States dollars. Therefore, the funds that are currently available are $300,851 US dollars, namely $109,532 US dollars under the reduced international assistance budget, taking into account the budget reduction which is currently under discussion in the working group on the budget, $91,369 US dollars, which is remaining under the Italian funds which were earmarked for international assistance, and $99,950 US dollars under the Indian funds which were also earmarked for international assistance. In other words, and as shown in the slide, 6 months after the beginning of the biennium, we only have half of the total funding for the biennium left for international assistance. Just to compare, also on the slide to the left, the approvals for the previous biennium, which amounted to $883,357 US dollars, and which were approved under the international assistance budget, completed by the Italian funds. I think these graphs clearly show the dramatic situation of the World Heritage Fund and the funds which are available for international assistance. It means that without the complementary funding from Italy, which we had received in September 2008, namely 250,000 euros, and the additional funding also received from India in November 2011, namely $99,950,000, we would not be in a position to approve more than 3 or 4 requests between now and the end of the biennium, end of 2013. It is also foreseeable that without further voluntary contributions, International Assistance Fund will run out very soon. I also want to point out that the funds for emergency assistance are still intact, namely $400,000, but that of course a few requests are in the pipeline for Afghanistan, and I believe also for Mali and for the Democratic Republic of Congo, taking into account the emergency situations currently happening in these countries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we now move directly to the draft decision? And I would like to give the floor to rapporteur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. Devonnet just told you, the Secretariat has presented a revised version of draft decision 36-14 that has been distributed to all committee members. So basically, we have to not to take into account the decision that was presented in the working document, and which included 3 parts, but this new draft, which includes 6 paragraphs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you agree to adopt this document like it is amended? Adopted. Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, now we move to the other item of our agenda. It's item 12A. Item 12A, which regards the future of the World Heritage Convention. The relevant document is whc12/36.com/12A. And I invite Mr. Rao to briefly present the progress report on this matter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned before the lunch break, item 12 concerns the reflection that has taken place over the last 3 years on the future of the World Heritage Convention. And item 12A essentially deals with the entire scope of the discussion that has so far taken place. And this was reported at the last session of the committee 35-COM12A, and subsequently it was taken note of by the General Assembly of States Parties. So the one item that was remaining and had to be formalized was the Strategic Action Plan, which was adopted by the General Assembly of States Parties, but the committee in its last session had asked for an implementation plan to be prepared. If you look at the Strategic Action Plan that was adopted by the General Assembly, it contains 6 main goals, and then it is some of the priorities identified and objectives have been outlined, but it does not have specific actions and activities listed therein. So the committee asked the advisory bodies and the center to develop an implementation plan, which we did in meetings that were held with the advisory bodies, as well as with many of the states parties. I must acknowledge also the fact that Australia, and particularly Mr. Greg Terrell, who led the entire process of reflecting on the future of the convention since 2009, played a major role in developing this implementation plan. So, Madam Chair, this document essentially lists all the 6 goals, and these have been elaborated further into specific activities that could be implemented. These are suggestions, of course. This is a draft implementation plan. Activities that could be implemented together with the performance indicators against each one of these activities, so that the committee will be able to then monitor the rate of implementation and take stock of it annually. We have also allocated in this table the responsibility as to who will be responsible for implementing each of these activities, the time frame, as well as an indicative financial implication for implementing these activities. Madam Chair, that's just a brief outline of how this document is presented and what it contains, and I believe the advisory bodies also have an intervention, and then if you allow, the chair of the reflection process, Australia, would like to make an intervention as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from members of the committee? If there are no comments from members of the committee, I would like to give the floor to a representative of Australia. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My intervention will be very brief. The Director of the Centre has outlined the document, for which I thank him very much. Can I just make two observations? Firstly, relates to the work of the external auditor and the discussion that we had on that. And Madam Chair, it is quite striking that the findings of the external audit, which are produced obviously through an independent process, are in many ways very similar to the conclusions of the process of reflection involving state parties. I think this probably affirms the conclusions that have been drawn and strengthens their validity and probably increases the importance of addressing them. Madam Chair, the second reflection is on budget. Many of the activities identified do not require additional budget to be implemented, but a number do. And that is obviously extremely challenging in the current circumstance. I think therefore, Madam Chair, one of the choices in front of the committee is not so much how to put issues aside for the long term, but how to, for the moment, for these difficult circumstances, temporarily set them aside. And I think in that respect, Madam Chair, the lessons of previous reflections that have happened in the past are very important. If we look back at the processes of reflection that took place around the time of the 30th anniversary of the Convention, or indeed the 20th, there were also processes of reflection looking to the future, but unfortunately many of the findings from those processes did not get taken up and did not get implemented. And I think that's the benefit that we have this time of both the external audit and the process of reflection on the future, that we cannot afford this time to not take up these recommendations and improve the workings of the Convention that we value so highly. So with that, Madam Chair, that's really contextual observations, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and I would like to give the floor to our advisory bodies to reflect on this matter. IUCN, floor is yours.
Thank you.
IUCN is here?
Yes, sorry.
Please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. And this is actually an intervention on behalf of all three of the advisory bodies. And we'd like to just firstly note that the outcomes of this process of reflection on the future of the Convention rest on a vast wealth of contributions and discussions about the way forward as we move into this fifth decade of the Convention, and we're pleased to have been able to engage strongly in this. And the process has confirmed many ways in which the Convention can be judged a success, but also many of the challenges that it's facing. In the same vein as the observations of the chair of the working group, it struck me that as I talk to people that have been working in this Convention longer than I have, and as I reflect on it, I often think of the words of George Santayana that said, those that cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And we don't have a good instrument in the Convention that is really there to think about the whole Convention and how it moves forward. So we very much welcome the strategic plan as a means to bring together in one place an instrument that can lead, we hope, to a much better managed and more effective Convention, and one where we can see and track progress, and one where we can also discuss priorities according to available resources. And we know this convention is complicated. It has a range of conflicting demands. We are pressured and under-resourced advisory bodies, and there's also a pressured and under-resourced secretariat. And the convention then sets extremely high expectations that it can achieve everything. So in these circumstances, working without a plan in such an environment is impossible. It's really vital to have a plan like this and for it to be something which has life in an endorsement by the General Assembly, by the committee, and by the states parties. We think it's helpful that the plan that's been put forward relates activities, but also to outcomes and also indicators. So we can see the whole shape of what is required, and we consider it's essential that mechanisms will be developed to allow us to evaluate the delivery of the plan over time and to see whether this is leading to enhanced consistency and performance of the convention and the reporting on that enhanced consistency and performance. We also welcome engagement in implementing the recommendations. We consider the emphasis on the provision of a coherent range of tools to support states parties in key aspects of the implementation of the convention is essential. Also, the emphasis on capacity building and to support the use of those tools together will be fundamental to the success of the strategic plan. We're also pleased to see that there's been some significant progress in a number of areas to implement already some of the requests in the Strategic Action Plan, notably the drafting of statements of outstanding universal value, the work on the respective inventory, which are both crucial tools and building blocks for future conservation. And lastly, and fundamentally, and also just to echo the two comments, although we didn't discuss this exactly, the two comments of the chair of the working group. Firstly, it seems to us to be absolutely essential now that we've been waiting 40 years for an implementation plan, and then two have come along at once, one to do with the Strategic Action Plan and one to do with the evaluation of the global strategy, that these need to be brought together into one instrument, and essentially the Strategic Action Plan should provide a vehicle to essentially carry everything forward. And lastly, just to note, as we've just come from the penultimate meeting of the budget group, that we do face circumstances at the moment where budget and available resources is an issue. So within this plan, priorities will need to be set, but at least it gives us a framework within which we can see and debate priorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, are there any comments on this document? Germany.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I fully agree with what has been said by the advisory bodies and been presented by the World Heritage Center. And having looked closely to the activities proposed and in this adopted strategic plan, I for sure see the need to link these plan with, for example, the newly adopted tourism program, the capacity building program, and decisions when taken by this and earlier committee meetings in terms of recommendations what should be done to further develop the processes within the convention. And I think seeing the budget constraints which are out there, this would help us possibly to save resources in concentrating on things which are cross-cutting over different areas of the convention. Thank you very much.
May I give the floor to Mr. Rao to explain how they understand, this action plan, please?
Thank you, Chair. If I may respond to what the delegate from Germany has raised, this is precisely the process that we followed, in fact, drawing upon all the other guidance documents and programs and thematic initiatives that were instituted by the committee. We've taken them on board, and as well as also the recommendations that came from the evaluation of the global strategy and pact. All these documents were taken into account in developing this, but like the chair of the working group mentioned, as well as the advisory bodies, there is a lot of overlap at the present moment. And we have to ensure that there is no duplication of effort, and we move forward with implementation of those priorities which are considered the highest priorities, but recognize also that an evaluation of the global strategy is like an audit. And implementation of those recommendations will be in the short term, whereas a global strategic action plan will be a medium to long-term kind of a document that will be obviously taken stock of annually by the committee and adjusted. The activities will be prioritized by the committee annually, depending on, the amount of resources that are available and the relative priority that the committee may assign. So this is constantly before your, for your monitoring and surveillance and, further guidance. And as the draft decision notes, we will continue to refine the activities precisely to try and avoid the overlap with the implementation plan of the external auditor's evaluation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I propose to move directly to the draft decision, which is in point 4 of the document WHC 12/36.com/12A. So, and I propose to adopt it in entirely. Are any objections to adopt this draft decision? I see none, so the decision 36.12A is adopted. Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, now we move on to the item 12B, decision-making procedures for the statutory organs of the World Heritage Convention. The relevant document is WHC 12/36.com/12B. And I invite Madame Rossler to briefly present the progress report on this matter. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. These decision-making procedures was also a part of the in-depth reflection process on the future of the World Heritage Convention. This document now provides an update on the follow-up to the recommendations of the expert meeting on the decision-making procedures of the statutory organs of the World Heritage Convention, which took place in December 2010 in Bahrain. These were then adopted by the World Heritage Committee in Decision 35/12, requesting implementation to improve the conduct of statutory meetings, the capacity-building related activities, the transparency of documents and statutory meetings, as well as to provide clarification on some of the World Heritage processes. Now, it covers the revision of the rules of procedures, which have been done and some need to be done next year, a study by the internal oversight services of UNESCO, which you can find in Annex 2. It provides also clarification on the types of expert meetings, further to the one we provided in document 5A. It also covers the conduct and responsibility of statutory meetings. And, Madam Chair, some of the most fundamental changes have been made here, including the live webcast at this meeting and the transparency of documents, which for the first time in the 40 years history of the World Heritage Convention have been publicly made available. You can also find in this document, and I would like to flag that, the proposal which was made to have a third session of the committee in relation to the General Assembly. And there we have a serious funding budgetary issue. And you find a reflection on this in point 6 of your draft decision. That's why I'm flagging this. It also includes capacity building issues, including the orientation session, which we have done here at this meeting, numerous meetings with the chairperson, you remember, in Paris on critical cases, also involving other parts of the secretariat, like the legal advisor. You also find here the guidance on draft decisions, and with our rapporteur we have actually used for this session the guidance on draft decisions. We have it actually here in our pile, so we are using that whenever you would like to amend decisions. Annex 1 also provides an overview of the reform measures already adopted by the World Heritage Committee, which we have implemented, and this document was distributed, if you remember, on the 15th of May when we had the information meeting for all state parties. With this, Madam Chair, I would like to turn to the advisory bodies for any comments they may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The advisory body, one will speak on behalf of 3 advisory bodies, or you want? Yes, please. I see Krom. Take the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yes, indeed, the advisory bodies try as much as possible to make joint statements in order to save time where that is the case. And so I am making this statement on behalf of all three advisory bodies. The advisory bodies are committed to active participation in the implementation of the decisions of 35 12B. We appreciate the steps undertaken already concerning decision-making procedures of the statutory organs and have recently participated in several consultation meetings on the broader overview and review of the operational guidelines. The advisory bodies do express their concern in regard to the division of the operational aspects of the implementation of the Convention from the policy decisions taken by the Committee. While we do think that it is useful for the policies of the Committee to be easily accessible, there are questions in regard to the status of the new document in relation to the operational guidelines and the potential for conflicting interpretations between the two documents. Nevertheless, we believe that the advisory bodies should be strong partners in any ongoing considerations of this issue. ICOMOS, in particular, would like to call attention to the Committee that any ongoing meetings on this topic would fall under the category of unfunded mandates, and given the serious pressures that they have on their resources, they would seek advice from the Committee on how to be able to proceed with active participation in this very important aspect. On a final note, the advisory bodies would call attention to the fact that the list of modular costs for core activities, which are included in Annex 3 in the document, do not reflect the total expenses to the advisory bodies, as they neither consider the costs occurring in the administration and preparation of mission activities, nor the costs of reporting and follow-up activities. Also, calculations of expenses for expert meetings, capacity building, and thematic studies may have to be revised, as they vary considerably depending on region, focus, and scope. Whilst the review of development projects could be much more expensive, and it needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. In any event, we look forward to continuing to work with the World Heritage Center on this issue in order to be able to refine this list for the future. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for giving us the opportunity to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, are any comments from your side? Yes, please, India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I look at Annex 1, 22.5 circumscribes the chairperson of the World Heritage Committee, and that's really in terms of the process and procedure of how and when questions should be put to a state party, not necessarily a member of the committee, to clarify questions that members may have. Now, as we have seen through this session, this stipulation seems to be probably unrealistic and probably undesirable, given the nature of the very vibrant debate that we had. I would suggest, Madam Chair, that this, along with any other measures that the committee may feel, should be reviewed, and that the chair should not be limited in the chair's discretion to bring both fact and information to the members of the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Japan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the World Heritage Center and World Heritage Fund is now under severe financial constraints, and this fact is not as widely and well known as it should be. And given this difficult situation, and later we will look at the draft decision that there's a suggestion to assess the feasibility of setting up a new ordinary session in the fall of 2013. And while we accept this assessing the feasibility of this having new session, but at the same time we have to look into the necessity very, very carefully in light of this financial situation. And also, there's a suggestion that the World Heritage Center is going to present a draft policy guidelines, and we would like to know, if possible, what sort of concrete items will be presented in the policy guideline, if any. Thank you.
Thank you. Estonia, floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a brief comment on the issue raised by India about information given by state parties at the committee session. We of course understand that this situation is difficult because of a calendar, really, because the state parties get the information about, or let's say the draft resolution quite late, and then it is the time slot to respond is quite small. So it's really an issue of a calendar which we should be looking at. But we need to be aware that the situation where a state party at the committee meeting provides a lot of new information is also a very difficult one, because this information then cannot be evaluated by the advisory bodies, by the committee, and we have had during this session also difficult situations when we have, let's say, conflicting views on this issue, and this makes the work of a committee quite difficult. So I think that one of the options that was also highlighted in the previous document of these recommendations was really to look at this calendar and make this make the evaluations available for state party earlier, so that this debate here in the room can be avoided. And I think that it's beneficial to both state party and to the committee. So this is something that we should really look into. And if this calendar problem can be revised, then I think that this problem will go away, and the rules of procedure that we just changed are actually a very good solution in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senegal, floor is yours.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je me joins aux autres pour remercier les auteurs de ce document qui va permettre au comité et à notre convention d'être encore plus efficace. Je sais que nous avons deux préoccupations majeures: gagner du temps, économiser des ressources, être efficace dans nos débats. Tout cela est important et je pense que les propositions faites vont dans une certaine mesure dans ce sens-là. Mais je vois un danger à terme. À force de poser des garde-fous pour que les États membres du comité n'aient pas à se prononcer, notamment sur les choses qui les concernent au plus haut point, à mettre des garde-fous pour que les rapports des organisations consultatives qui sont nos amis, qui sont les constantes de la Convention, c'est vrai, ils sont les amis et les constantes, ils sont toujours là, nous sommes des partants, on vient, on part, ils sont là, ils sont très importants, mais je pense que leur parole n'est pas parole d'évangile. Donc je pense qu'il ne faut pas se précipiter dans les adoptions, il faut prendre le temps de regarder ces textes dans les détails et leurs implications pour qu'on ne soit pas dans l'obligation dans 2 ans de dire qu'on s'était trompé et essayer d'enclencher un processus long et onéreux de reprise des normes. Voilà, je pousse juste un peu à la prudence, à ne pas faire la précipitation dans l'adoption. Merci.
Thank you very much. I will give the floor to Mr. Rao for some clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll deal with the last question raised by, or the observation made by the delegate of Senegal. I think you are referring to Rule 22.7, and the rule essentially asks for the state member of the committee not to advocate in relation to their own properties, either for nominations or for state of conservation report. And also there is a suggestion that you will not present new information after the statutory deadlines. It's not to sort of prevent the exchange of information with the advisory bodies during the calendar that has been prescribed for presenting nominations, there are drafts that can be presented at the end of September. There can be additional information that can be exchanged. And now we are also talking about the upstream process where that engagement can take place. These reform measures that have been adopted by the committee only deal with the conduct of statutory meetings, the manner in which committee members deal with their own cases during the discussions of various items. So I hope I have been able to clarify that particular point. The issue raised by Japan on the third session is indeed relevant. We had discussed this extensively in the budget working group as well, and in fact, the chair of the budget working group was of the opinion of inserting a specific paragraph in the draft decision which he will be presenting tomorrow. But when we considered that it is already there on the agenda under item 12B, it's not included under the budget item for now. If you look at the draft decision, what we are suggesting is that we will assess the feasibility in more detail and bring it to you at the 37th session next year, because we have to look at what the financial implication and the organizational implications will be. Given the fact that the third session, the ordinary session of the committee, is always held at UNESCO headquarters, so the costs are much lower than the costs of the other regular sessions, and it's mainly the interpretation and translation costs that are involved. But in any case, we will conduct a detailed feasibility study and present it to you at the next session. The last comment is in relation to the comment made by the delegate of India about Rule 22.5, about the order in which the chair puts questions to the members of the committee. Now, as I mentioned before lunch also, all these changes have been brought about through an extensive reflection process. So these suggestions come from states parties to the convention. And as the chair of the future process also mentioned, this has come through 3 separate sessions of the committee, and it was approved at the last session of the World Heritage Committee. Now, if the committee wants to change the rule, it is absolutely free to do so, but it would be something that has to be reflected upon further. And for that purpose, we are providing an additional item in the agenda which we will present to you tomorrow, the provisional agenda for the next session of the committee, and we are proposing to establish a working group on the rules of procedure of the committee. So that will provide an opportunity for the committee members to further reflect on any changes that they wish to make to the rules of procedure. One last point that I would like to make in relation to the question from the delegate of Japan as to what these policy guidelines are going to be. This is in the last paragraph of the draft decision, which mentions that the policy guidelines will be developed and presented to the 37th session of the World Heritage Committee. This is again a decision made by the committee at its last session, and the rationale for making that decision by the committee was when it looked at the operational guidelines, it found that there are many things which are really not statutory in nature. There are in the form of providing guidance on implementation of the convention, and something that impacts more on policy issues rather than actual implementation processes. So the idea is to have a meeting in January with the advisory bodies and the center, and to review the operational guidelines, see what is there that is more in the nature of policy guidance, and also pull them out and develop further policy guidance, which can be reflected in a separate document called the policy guidelines as opposed to the operational guidelines. So that is the intent of that decision which the committee took last year, and we will make an attempt and a draft and come to you at the next session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. My feeling is that maybe some member states has some confusion, that these editions, that annexes which we have in this document concerning the decision adopted by the 35th session of the, it means that we have not to adopt these decisions. We have to adopt the decision, the draft decision, which is in the document which reflects the process which is on the way concerning this matter. Serbia, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Discussing the future of the World Heritage Convention, we do believe that the issue of decision-making procedures is of extreme importance. We are grateful for the introductory paper and for the draft decision introduced. We do believe that proposals made and also the content of the draft decision meet in many respects our expectations, or at least we hope they will improve our effectiveness, efficiency, and especially transparency in the future. But having myself 4 last meetings personal and my state experience, I feel obliged to support fully the position of India concerning the issue they raised, and even more, the position of Estonia. We do believe that improving and preparing the document mentioned in the last paragraph, policy guidelines, we may improve the work and we make easier our task in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw some other country who wants to take. No, India wanted to clarify something.
Madam, I would simply wish you to bring on record the fact that in the conduct of the proceedings of the committee, as witnessed this time and probably again, that this stipulation of 22.5 is both restrictive and not conducive to a full examination of the issues, and that therefore this should be left to the wisdom of the chair, in which we have full faith. I would just suggest we bring this on record for future guidance.
France, floor is yours.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je voulais faire juste écho à ce qui avait été dit précédemment par l'Estonie. C'est un sujet qui n'a pas été vraiment abordé dans ce document, mais dans la lignée d'ailleurs d'une décision de l'an dernier, je pense qu'il sera nécessaire de réfléchir plus avant au calendrier. Je crois qu'effectivement, dans la question des réactions ou des rapports entre les avis des organisations consultatives et les États membres, il y a une question de temps. Et cette question de temps, je pense que nous devrions y accorder plus d'attention. Il me semble que c'est là que résident certaines difficultés. Je n'ai pas de solution à proposer, mais je pense que c'est un thème qui doit rester à l'ordre du jour. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that we have very good discussion and clear explications. This work is not ended, so its work is going on. So all opinions will be reflected in the stenography, so the Secretariat will know very well what direction they have to go in this work. So now I propose, if you have nothing against, I propose to move straight to the draft decision and give the floor to the rapporteur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee has to approve the draft decision 36-12B, which includes seven paragraphs. We have received, just to inform you, a slight amendment from the part of the Swiss delegation, so as to include in paragraph 7, after World Heritage Center, the reference in collaboration with advisory bodies. So apart from this amendment, Madam Chair, there is no other proposal for this draft decision.
Are there any objections to adopt the whole decision and as amended in the last paragraph? I see no objection. Adopted. Thank you very much. Now, dear colleagues, we will move to the next item of our agenda. It's progress report on the reflection concerning the upstream processes. This item is presented in document WHC 12/36.com/12C. I would like to invite Mr. Rao of World Heritage Center to briefly present this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the session, you've heard this word, the upstream process, being discussed many times and raised by many committee members and states parties. And this also is an initiative that emanates from the reflection of the future of the convention. And it was an initiative actually launched by the Secretariat, unlike what some would like to believe. This is an initiative after reflecting on some of the problems that we have encountered and noticed that nominations are presented but frequently fail. The fact that international assistance is provided for preparing nominations, but the money goes waste because the nomination does not succeed. And we found that about only 29% of the international assistance provided for preparatory assistance would succeed. That was a very poor state of affairs, and this was some figures from 2008. So as part of the future of the convention, since 2009, we have looked at how the system could be improved. And we must thank the government of Thailand and Japan, who hosted international expert meetings in Phuket, where a large number of committee members and states parties participated. And they evolved this whole initiative for providing upstream support to states parties in identifying suitable nominations and preparing nominations and then bringing them forward to the committee for approval. Now, the basic elements and principles of this upstream initiative is that there is no conflict of interest between states parties and advisory bodies. It is a collaborative effort that needs to be undertaken because it is in our collective interest to identify sites that have outstanding universal value. It's not just up to the member states or to the advisory bodies to identify such sites. So the idea behind this upstream process is to work with states parties right from the very beginning. That is to identify sites that should go on the tentative list and then identify priorities within the tentative list and guide states parties to tell them which are those sites which merit inclusion on the World Heritage Sites, which have the potential to meet the criteria and the conditions of integrity and authenticity. And therefore, we work with them and help them to develop the appropriate comparative analysis and the nomination dossier, enable them to fix the conditions of integrity and the other requirements, and then advise them when to present the nomination. So this is a collaborative effort of working together with the states parties right from the very beginning and until the time that the nominations succeed. However, in this engagement, if in the very first instance of engagement it is so determined that there is no potential, then the advisory bodies would also be in a position to tell the state party that this particular nomination has no possibility, and therefore we would advise that you move to another site on your tentative list. So this kind of a constant engagement is what is foreseen. So the committee in its previous sessions approved this upstream process as an experimental and voluntary process. It was completely voluntary and an experimental stage. That is the stage it is at the present moment. And it invited each of the regional groups of UNESCO to present 2 draft nominations or 2 suggestions for projects that could be undertaken in collaboration with the center and the advisory bodies. So what this document presents is a progress report on how this experimental and voluntary process is currently being implemented at each of those 10 sites. Now, as you will notice from the brief progress that has been presented, the results are mixed. In some cases, the projects have moved forward well ahead, and in some they are lagging behind, and the reasons have been outlined here. The idea is to continue to work with the states parties and see how these nominations can then be brought before the committee. I may also add, Madam Chair, considering the extensive discussion that has taken place during the presentation of the nominations at this session about the need for such upstream support, about the need for advisory missions, etc., that the committee at some point might wish to formalize this arrangement and sort of integrate it into the operational guidelines. It might be too early to do that now, but certainly this kind of a mentoring process of working with states parties to help with the nominations, which are really of outstanding quality, needs to be formalized so that the technical support and guidance from the advisory bodies can be forthcoming to states parties right from the very initial stages. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Advisory body, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are some comments on behalf of ICOMOS. The upstream process is a concept that has taken root over the past few years and one that ICOMOS strongly supports. Many of the issues that are discussed at committee sessions in relation to both nominations and state of conservation reports have their origins in decisions made at a much earlier stage in the process. The fact that the implications of these early decisions are not realized sometimes until committee meetings may cause frustration or even loss of face by stakeholders if the decision goes against what is requested, and may also be financially damaging. Complex nominations, for instance, that have taken many years to develop cost large sums of money, all of which may be seen to be wasted. Similarly, in the SOC process, detailed development of infrastructural or other development projects, if not discussed at an early stage, may be extremely expensive to reverse. We consider that there is a need for dialogue at an early stage in the development of nominations and of major projects, and that need is now widely acknowledged. Gradually, this upstream process is being formalized, and during the last year, as you've heard, and as this document reports, upstream process nomination pilot projects have been commenced as an experiment, as it were. However, ICOMOS considers that there is a need to extend this formalization to develop a firmer context for upstream work. As working upstream impacts on other working arrangements, we consider there is a need to negotiate a way forward and consider what tools might be needed to optimize success. First, if upstream advice to state parties on potential nominations is to be guided by an understanding of gaps in the World Heritage List and by thematic studies, this will give a certain priority to more work on these areas, and particularly on updating the gap reports that the advisory bodies produced in 2004. Similarly, in terms of state of conservation reports, if there is to be more dialogue with state parties on potential projects and management issues, ICOMOS suggests we need to formalize arrangements for advisory missions. Thirdly, upstream work does involve resources. Currently, these are not available for most of the necessary work. This year, for instance, ICOMOS has carried out its overview of nominations submitted in September without payment. Similarly, we've attended meetings with state parties on potential nominations to offer advice, again without payment. ICOMOS would therefore greatly welcome the opportunity to consider how upstream work could become a formal tool of the World Heritage process and perhaps recognised within the operational guidelines, as the Director of the World Heritage Centre has just mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, everybody wants to. Yes, IUCN, please take the floor.
Thanks, Chair. On this item, both ICOMOS and IUCN, I think, see things similarly, but we both have observations to make. So for IUCN, firstly, I think it's important to emphasise our commitment to this process and that we see this as a discussion that has been happening over several sessions of the committee and also with some important meetings such as the one that Mr. Rao mentioned in Phuket. And as I indicated in the intervention in 5B, I explained what our programme is anticipated to be within IUCN on World Heritage for the next 4 years as we go into our next quadrennium. And we're proposing that we would seek to make this whole line of work on upstream process one of the lines of action, one of 3 lines of action in our future programme, focusing in particular on sites that are important for biodiversity in the world and noting the extreme and growing global threat to those places. We think the upstream process is absolutely the place now where we can look at the issues that have been raised very clearly at this committee, but are not new in terms of the discussion about the nature of this nomination process being something which has all the potential negatives that ICOMOS outlined if it is not handled in a way which is constructive throughout the process. We have a role which is particular and is, in some ways, I think, is typified by the positioning of our desks in this room. So we sit between you as a decision-taking body, as a committee, as an institution, the states parties that are nominating, and our role is an advisory one. And I think we have two lines of relationship that are important here. One is with states parties, and for IUCN, many states parties are members of IUCN as, in a state capacity, but our formal advisory role is a role to you, the committee, and it's not an advisory role as it's codified at the moment expressly to the nominating states parties. And you have traditionally always expected us to give objective advice to you on the nominations that are put forward, and I think there clearly is a principle there which, whilst there's no general conflict of interest between what we're all seeking to achieve through this convention, we cannot both be an evaluator of a nomination and simultaneously be the author of a nomination. I think immediately one would see those things are not compatible. So that we do need to manage a potential conflict of interest in this process, and I think we do need to explore the modalities that would enable us to do that while still keeping the central task of this convention to receive nominations from states parties that are appropriate to the operational guidelines that you, the committee, have put forward. If I could next turn to the pilot projects, we're very pleased to see that at least for the 4 natural pilot projects that we have underway, that these are showing good progress. In fact, the first nomination to come into the cycle for you to consider will be next year from this upstream process, which is the nomination that's now been submitted by Namibia. But we also now have held, and I think they've been very productive processes with both the Dinaric Karst and with Lake Ohrid. The 4th project with the Grenadines has not moved forward yet in the sense of an activity taking place, but we have dates for an advisory mission. And we think that there is good progress there. The colleague of mine, Boris Erg, who's taken part in 2 of those activities, was here in the earlier part of this meeting. And one of the points he noted in the experience of this is how much the capacity building element of the advisory missions that have taken place has been appreciated. Because this is a complicated convention. I came into it writing a nomination, and it does take a long time to really understand what all these things that we deal with all the time as advisory bodies, but states parties don't deal with all the time, like the nether regions of the operational guidelines really mean in practice. And the capacity building element to help really translate what the convention is seeking in its operational guidelines into a potential nomination, debate options, debate strategies has been an important part of the experience so far. And we think really putting that capacity building element into the convention is a key challenge. Like ICOMOS, though, we don't see that the pilot efforts, as they're conceived in this item at the moment, are really enough. And nor do we think that the lessons that we need to learn about, if one could say, reform of this process will entirely be learned simply from the pilot projects that have been put forward. Thus, as we're looking to our next 4 years of work, in fact, most of the efforts that we've been taking forward are not those that are in the 4 pilot projects, but are within a range of other initiatives that we're essentially either funding ourselves or we're trying to raise funds for. And I'll just mention some of those. One of those is to join, at the invitation of the World Heritage Centre, the informal technical check that is provided for nominations in September each year, as well as continuing to work with the Centre on the completeness check of new nominations that takes place in February before they're accepted into the process. And that does give some opportunity, albeit both of those really quite late in the process, to at least provide some feedback to nominating states parties through a process that's already established. But the calendar is an issue. The second is the work that I mentioned, and I waived this already, which is work specifically focused in Africa, which is a priority for my program at the moment, which is to recognize where the potential gaps are for natural heritage and encourage states parties to fill them, and that's resulted in part in encouraging the nomination of the Bijagos archipelago, which also has come into the system for evaluation during the coming cycle. Also, we continue to work on thematic studies, and with the support of both Germany and Australia, we're revising the studies for 3 of the 4 natural criteria at the moment. And I've also mentioned, and so I won't repeat in detail, the very productive experience we've had with the African World Heritage Fund, running courses to mentor and support states that are preparing or thinking of preparing nominations at a very early stage in their experience. We've also, in a limited way, tried to follow up on some of the deferral recommendations that have been made in previous sessions of the committee, notably in Tajikistan. So the Tajik National Park is a site where we've been able to assign a mentor to assist follow-up to a deferral that took place 2 years ago at the request of the state party. And I think all of those are productive. But I think beyond those efforts, we do need to look at other options that may be additionally effective. And I think notably one area which we just really haven't touched on at all is the role of tentative lists. So how can we get involved in providing support and advice to state parties to think about what is on their tentative lists and the potential priorities that they have within them. So this is really, I think, what we've been doing so far. I'd just like to conclude with some observations on the challenges, I think, as we see them. And there are challenges here, some of which have been touched on in the debates that have taken place on nominations that are on the table at the moment. Those are not really about the upstream process. In a way, they're the downstream process once a nomination has been put forward. But we've opened up some discussions about, perhaps not for the nature missions, but for some of the culture sites, about the use of advisory missions within that process. And I think that needs to be looked at. And I'd like to note we did, in fact, propose in both of the deferral, the sites recommended for deferral by IUCN, a advisory activity within the decisions, and as they were inscribed, that has not eventuated, but to note that was part of those decisions. However, I think it's axiomatic that it's for the state party to make nominations, so it is, and in this process it has to remain something where the state sovereignty has to be paramount, and only a state can decide to put forward a nomination. And so the roles of all of the actors need to be clear, and we can't be put in a position where we can insist or somehow be dictating what the correct nomination is. We have to provide observations and advice. Secondly, a question I have is what can be done to ensure a culture of dialogue and additional communication, and not only between us and the states parties, but between us as advisory bodies and you, the committee. Because I would suggest that's not facilitated by essentially leaving that communication to what is sometimes a courtroom-style atmosphere when it comes to the nomination being on the table here. So I think, as well as exploring our dialogue with states parties, we should also explore how can the dialogue take place with the committee in atmospheres that are less charged than the final moment where it is a yes/no decision, or a yes/no or maybe decision that is put forward. A third point, I think, is about the culture of expertise that needs to be cultivated, and we would welcome a way to try to bring together communication with the nature focal points in delegations, to also be able to debate issues and questions, to be able to debate alternatives and strategies that sit within decisions. And I did make, again, another observation in the opening of 5B about us being here as quite a reasonably sized delegation and being keen to discuss with delegations and committee members any issues that they had. We didn't have too much uptake, but I think we had a good example with the Shiritoko decision, which was not a nomination, but was a state of conservation report, where we were able to, I think, find a good way to produce a consensus and a decision that was then introduced in the proper way within the committee, but where we'd been able to have a good interaction with the state party to facilitate that. I also think, finally, that we need to join the thinking on the World Heritage Convention with other instruments, and South Africa made the observation earlier about linking this convention to other conventions. I think too often when states are nominating, they're only thinking of World Heritage, but actually sometimes there are other instruments. I work a lot actually with the UNESCO Geoparks initiative, and it produces many of the same results and also positive cries and congratulations that one gets from World Heritage status. We have the Man and Biosphere Programme, we have the Ramsar Convention, and I think we need to look at all these instruments not only as alternatives for specific sites, but how they jointly contribute to conservation strategies to really imagine how we could do this better. Lastly, I would just like to note that I think there are 2 points in the earlier discussion around item 9A, which have been dealt with in the evaluation of the global strategy, that I think could also help us, and we would just like to note, because I think they get to some of the heart of it. One is that I think it would be, we would feel, I think, more comfortable if the separation that's been proposed in that process between the committee and nominating states parties could eventually take place, because it is difficult to face a committee where, you know, large numbers of the committee are also proposers of nominations, and I think it does make it challenging for us to have a view with you, have a relationship with you as an institutional body, and also then separately have a relationship with those of you that are states parties that are nominating. And secondly, I think this does ultimately, although we're talking about the relationship with the advisory bodies, also at the heart of this discussion, and we should be sure we don't miss it, is the operational guidelines are part of this discussion. And my observation for what it's worth, and it struck me a lot, particularly last year and to a degree this year, is sometimes we're not really discussing a technical difference of opinion between what the advisory body thinks and what the committee thinks, but the issue is really to what extent are the quite rigorous procedures of the operational guidelines as they're put forward, and they're quite strongly codified, and we feel we advise you within those, really things which are one could say achievable in the decision that the committee wishes to reach. Other than that, I won't repeat the points about budget, I won't repeat the points about timeline, because we've covered those in earlier interventions, but they are fundamentally important, and timeline at least is one very tangible thing that you could focus on to think about how dialogue is facilitated. And lastly, I think really we do feel that this process, and perhaps more than any other committee in my experience, this tough dialogue we've had, which I think is actually quite helpful to get out on the table, is what's needed to make this a more constructive convention. I came into World Heritage because I wrote a nomination, and it took us 8 years. We saw IUCN, they arrived in 2001, and they didn't write anything to us, and then we went to the committee, and six weeks before we found out that we were recommended for inscription. I have to say, these days IUCN doesn't do that. We have a lot of interaction, as my slide, as I introduced 8B, indicated with states parties within the confines of the process that you give us and the resources that you give us. So I think we've significantly improved. but as somebody who's been on the receiving end, somebody who now has the responsibility to try to manage our process and advise you, I do think it's essential that we remember that we're all in the same game here, and I would welcome, and I'm sure there will be a good discussion. So thank you, Chair. Sorry it's a long intervention, but I think with so many points, it was important to really get a few things off my chest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Serbia, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm grateful for a long and, for us at least, inspiring last statement, as well as previous ones. 4 years ago, I asked my colleagues, already very well informed and involved, why we are not proposing other properties, sites, cultural heritage, to inscribe on this extremely important, respectable World Heritage List. Now I know the answer. I knew even after first experience 4 years ago. This is certainly a very difficult process for nominating a property to the World Heritage List. Indeed, this is not only challenging, but as I said, very difficult process. And I'm certain that we all agree here that we need to do utmost for improving and strengthening current nomination process. How? We have to discuss. It seems to me that we have to work even more together especially with advisory bodies and Secretariat, World Heritage Center, and we have to do that constantly. We consider that the idea to have at the moment 10 pilot projects is a very good one, including the project just mentioned, and we are very proud to be part of it. This is the pilot project on the generic car serial nomination. This is not only serial, but transnational serial nomination. And I'm glad to hear, through the report of the representative of the IUCN, that this is, it seems to be a good example between Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro. We intend to continue, and not only to continue, but the state parties, and it is rightfully mentioned in the background paper, are now working towards their harmonized tentative list submissions, which is also maybe a new way. We hope that this discussion and this rather modest draft decision will help in the future the processes as such. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. India, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was delighted at the commitment articulated by the distinguished director of the World Heritage Center, and we fully concur with it. I was also delighted with the elaborate and comprehensive response of the advisory bodies, the indication from the ICOMOS that of the importance of dialogue between the advisory bodies and the state party. And actually, I'm very encouraged by the response of the advisory bodies. Madam Chair, I just have a question, just information. The pilot project in the Maldives, Para 10, this is a project which probably began in 2009 or 2010, or it was thought of then. It was approved in June 2011, and the state party goes ahead and does a preliminary survey of 21 coral stone mosques, and so far it is extremely good and encouraging. Unfortunately, since then, and the year that has gone by, no direct contact between the state party and the relevant advisory body has taken place. So I'm a little curious as to what is meant by direct contact, and I'm concerned that no contact has taken place, and I'm wondering where this will go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please, it's ICOMOS, please. Can you answer the question? Yes, you put the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in response to the question from the Honourable Delegate for India, the language does not mean no contact. It means there has not been a meeting or on site, and there are various reasons why not, but there certainly has been contact with the state party on how this quite complicated serial project that they initially envisaged could go ahead, and the sort of issues and concerns that we had and how they might address them. So I hope that reassures him that this does not mean nothing.
Thank you very much. South Africa, floor is yours. Excuse me, Senegal, floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Nous avons suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt ce qui a été dit par les organisations consultatives et nous nous rendons compte encore davantage du rôle extrêmement important qu'elles sont en train de jouer pour aider au renforcement et à l'efficacité de notre convention. Je voudrais cependant faire quelques observations en partant des constats que nous avons faits et d'un certain nombre de problèmes qui ont été soulevés. Le premier constat que nous voudrions soulever, c'est que les organisations consultatives nous ont dit qu'elles manquaient parfois de moyens, de temps et souvent de bras. Donc, de ce point de vue-là, je pense que tant que nous n'aurons pas suffisamment de moyens pour leur donner des tâches supplémentaires, il faut réfléchir à la question. Mais le processus en amont me pose aussi quelques problèmes, au moins sur 2 points. Des points d'ailleurs qui avaient été soulevés par les organisations consultatives. Nous sommes d'accord que ces organisations consultatives sont les évaluateurs des dossiers de nomination présentés par les États. C'est donc d'une certaine manière des juges. Alors la question que je me pose, c'est que si les organisations consultatives deviennent de fait des porteuses de dossiers de nomination, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas là aussi le conflit d'intérêts qu'on reprochait aux États partis qui présentent des dossiers de nomination? Qui va juger de la validité des dossiers de nomination s'ils sont préparés en amont déjà par les organisations consultatives? Je pense qu'il y a là un problème auquel nous devrions sérieusement songer. Néanmoins, l'accompagnement en amont peut être quelque chose d'intéressant. Je pense qu'on peut suggérer un accompagnement renforcé pour des sites spécifiques à la demande des États partis ou même du comité. Si nous pensons qu'il y a un site intéressant, qu'il n'y a pas suffisamment de capacité pour préparer les dossiers, on demande aux organisations consultatives de le faire. Mais généraliser cette règle, à mon avis, pourrait à terme poser des problèmes de conflit d'intérêts autrement plus complexes que ceux que nous constatons de manière épisodique entre des États membres du comité qui présentent des dossiers. Parce qu'il ne faut pas oublier, les organisations consultatives sont des constantes. Si on généralise des règles comme ça, ne vont plus passer ou alors ne passeront plus facilement que les dossiers préparés par les organisations consultatives. Moi, je pense que le travail en amont, on peut le renforcer, on peut l'améliorer en tournant la perspective. Il faudrait que le dialogue soit plus fort, plus permanent, plus constant, plus fluide entre les pays qui préparent des dossiers de nomination et les organisations consultatives. Je trouve que si on mettait des efforts, si on mettait des ressources, si on mettait des moyens à la disposition des organisations consultatives, elles pourraient être beaucoup plus proactives par rapport aux propositions des États, les conseiller de manière plus efficace, et cela va en même temps renforcer les capacités locales et faire de telle sorte que notre convention avance mieux et plus vite dans l'intérêt de tous. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Switzerland, floor is yours.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Nous avons attentivement écouté tout ce qui a été dit déjà, et notamment aussi le long discours de l'IUCN. Nous trouvons fort intéressant ce qui a été soulevé et les nombreux points qui ont été soulevés par M. Bannan. Évidemment, ce processus upstream est très important parce qu'il apporte de l'aide pour les États parties afin que des candidatures puissent peut-être aboutir de manière positive. Il faut se rappeler que cette aide peut aussi dire le contraire, que de reconnaître très tôt qu'une candidature que peut-être un État aimerait porter en avant ne pourra pas aboutir et donc il incombera aux États de reconnaître ce fait. J'aimerais souligner, à côté de nombreux points de calendrier, de questions de ressources, etc., souligner un point qui nous semble très important. En fait, ce processus upstream existe dans une forme précise depuis le début de la liste indicative, de la liste du patrimoine mondial, et c'est la liste indicative. Les listes indicatives des États parties, c'est le upstream process de chaque État partie. Et nous devons aussi appeler à la responsabilité des États parties de préparer leurs listes indicatives avec le soin nécessaire, avec le travail nécessaire, afin d'éviter qu'on a sur cette liste des biens qui ne peuvent pas être inscrits sur la liste indicative. Il y a des processus à appliquer, à inventer au niveau national. Et il faut que les États parties ne demandent pas uniquement de l'aide à l'extérieur, mais se donnent aussi de la peine de travailler eux-mêmes avec toutes les ressources qui existent. Il y a aujourd'hui un grand nombre de documents qui sont à disposition, qui donnent déjà beaucoup d'informations à chacun de faire ce travail. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Algeria, floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais remercier le Centre du patrimoine mondial et les organisations consultatives pour la qualité de la réflexion qui nous est rendue aujourd'hui. Nous sommes bien entendu en faveur de ce processus en amont qui constitue un accompagnement fort utile pour l'élaboration des propositions d'inscription. Nous voudrions cependant être éclairés sur un aspect. Quelle serait la valeur de l'expertise de l'expert qui fait partie du panel de l'organe consultatif dans le cadre de la proposition d'expertise? Est-ce que l'expertise pourrait constituer un avis favorable et préalable à la proposition d'inscription à soumettre à la délibération du comité? Monsieur le délégué de la Suisse vient de dire que ce processus existait d'une certaine manière bien avant, lors de l'élaboration des listes indicatives. Et nous nous sommes posé la question, effectivement, lorsque nous avions préparé nos listes indicatives, nous avions discuté de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle et identifié avec l'expert qui nous a été envoyé certains sites dans le cadre de la stratégie mise en place et de la thématique qui a été mise en place. Étant donné que l'expert qui a déjà identifié ces biens comme ayant une valeur universelle exceptionnelle, par la suite, nous devons faire un dossier, mais ce dossier pourrait être soumis à l'organe consultatif pour avis, le dossier complet, et cet organe pourrait ne pas avoir un avis favorable sur la valeur universelle exceptionnelle des sites qui ont déjà été identifiés par l'expert qui fait partie de l'organe consultatif. Nous avons connu ça dans l'ancien système du processus, et dans ce nouveau processus, nous aimerions être éclairés sur cet aspect, que nous considérons comme une étape préalable à la proposition d'inscription. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Japan, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I also do thanks to the Secretariat of the World Heritage Center and also the advisory bodies for your very comprehensive and stipulative report on in particular, the pilot project of upstream process. And also we are very happy to hear some progress in terms of both the improvement of the process of nomination and also I want to stress the capacity building element. Although it is the fact that we are facing the problem of the financial and human resources constraint on this point. I think all of us feel the necessity to improve the nomination process, and one of the key elements is how to strengthen the dialogue between the state party and the advisory body for specific nomination process. And in order to improve that the dialogue, we also need, in general speaking, the very general dialogue or the informal dialogue between the World Heritage Committee itself and the group of the state party with the advisory committee or advisory body to find any elaborated way or the measures to improve the nomination process. And also in that case, the lesson from the 10 pilot project will be very give us the fruitful implications for those dialogue. And anyway, we would like to keep the very fruitful dialogue with the advisory bodies for the improvement of the nomination process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Estonia, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We think that one of the aims to introducing this upstream process was, of course, to reduce the number of properties that experience significant problems during the nomination process, and maybe a further goal even could be to provide a model or best practice nomination dossiers of similar typology to guide development of a nomination. But we understand that we are now talking more about the interaction, the communication, and we also believe in the need to interact with state parties from a very early stage, and we have no doubt that the advisory bodies, whose rigor, objectivity and professionalism we value very highly, would like to offer advice throughout the process so that all necessary communication could happen before the session between the advisory bodies, center and state parties, and by the established deadlines for providing new information. We might discuss the need to change the calendar as it is posing problems, but at the moment we need to be aware that the deadlines are really fixed in the operational guidelines, and the advisory bodies as well as the committee needs to respect them. And I think that also there might be some simple measures in this process that could be helpful also for the state parties to consider. I think, as was recommended by the working group of operational guidelines, that one very desirable initiative is to really carry out this preparatory work to establish that the property has a potential to justify OUV before we really take on this difficult task. And we have heard in this room that some nominations have been prepared for 12 years, for 8 years. This is a really long time. And of course, we are all fond of our natural and cultural heritage, and we believe in this potential. But it would be really helpful in a very early age to have some feedback on that. And also, I think it's only natural that when a state party has an idea to propose a nomination, which of course the state party fully believes in. The next question is, when is the next deadline? But maybe we should ask more, how much time do we really need? So we should take more time ourselves to prepare a really good nomination, because as IUCN mentioned, they cannot do it for us. And also one final point is maybe that we could make better use of the opportunity that has been already provided in the operational guidelines, namely to use this 30th September preliminary deadline, which allows to pass the, let's say, technical or completeness check before the nominations proceed to advisory bodies again. Because, of course, it's not an evaluation of substance, but it is a good way to ensure that, for instance, all elements of protection and management are clearly articulated, that all technical details that needs to be there are there. So it also gives state party an extra option, which might be helpful in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Franz, floor is yours.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Oui, moi aussi je voulais réagir à certaines formules que j'ai entendues à propos du processus en amont. Bien évidemment, en aucun cas, l'organe consultatif, dans ce cas, ne peut être considéré comme l'auteur ou le directeur de la proposition d'inscription. Pour moi, cela va de soi. Et je pense que dans ces conditions, l'évocation d'un éventuel conflit d'intérêts, d'une certaine façon, ne tient pas. Ce que j'imagine plutôt en ce qui concerne ce processus, c'est en fait un processus de validation au long cours, suivant les différentes étapes méthodologiques de l'établissement d'une proposition d'inscription qui permet, évidemment dans le cadre d'un dialogue scientifique, d'assurer finalement la progression de la demande vers évidemment le résultat que l'on souhaite. Et je pense d'ailleurs que ce dialogue peut aussi, et ce n'est pas paradoxal, permettre à l'organe consultatif d'avoir une meilleure appréciation ou un jugement plus approfondi sur la proposition qui peut être faite. Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. Mexico, floor is yours.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Quisiéramos también agradecer al centro por este informe y también a los participantes en esta reflexión. México ha participado en este tipo de conversaciones por largo tiempo y creemos que esta es la reflexión correcta. Quisiera sumar mi voz a los comentarios de quienes han ligado el proceso upstream y con el otro, que es la retroalimentación, con el feedback, que parece ser uno de los temas que más, no quiero decir conflictos o problemas, pero causa más irritantes en el proceso de revisión de expedientes. La sensación de que no hubo la retroalimentación suficiente durante el proceso de preparación de nominaciones o de otras posibles requerimientos de asistencia que los países puedan tener. Repito y quiero dejar muy claro que no estoy asegurando que no haya habido esa retroalimentación, sino que por los comentarios que han surgido en los debates de este comité, existe la sensación de que debe de mejorarse el canal de retroalimentación entre los órganos consultivos y los Estados parte. Y este debe de ser, creemos, una de las conclusiones importantes de esta reflexión. Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much. Germany, floor is yours.
Sorry, I didn't get it. Thank you, Madam President. I think this discussion here is very fruitful because it brings us to the point of the matter. We have all seen in the course of the items that newly arise here or that came to as a top of an iceberg out of a longer discussion that already happened in regions. They are of relevance and they have to be dealt with. So in such a dialogue process is what we really need. I do think that conflict of interest in principle can very well occur because if your task is to do a pilot project, everybody wants to do a pilot project which is successful. and it may very well be totally objective, but the risk is inherent. So maybe there have to be precautions made that it's not exactly the same people who do that, or maybe at a later stage we may have a kind of advisory cell that takes care of advising while others would then look into the case. I do think that we need this dialogue also really for the objective facts, and I think that that can be avoided because this factual error problem, you may think that I'm raising this because of the individual point, but there were 20 countries affected and 13 who didn't get an answer up to the committee meeting. We have to avoid such situations. People have to clear up because everybody has an interest to get to the real source. What would interest me, or if people would not, I would already be happy. I have the feeling that the advisory bodies don't see this as an extra burden. That is what I feared initially, that they would say, then I need to send more emails, I need to meet more people, I have more missions, I have more discussion at a time when I cannot organize it. They may come, the questions, at a time when they are not convenient because of other topics. If everybody says that this is well-functioning and efficient, I would be totally pleased. Maybe, is it? Can we do this? Or does ICOMOS need more people to be able to do it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that all members of the committee express their opinion. I now give the floor to Barbados. Excuse me, I see the other members of the committee, United Arab Emirates. And I would like to ask you, please raise your name, please, who else wants to understand, because we have to plan our time. Who else wants to take the floor? I see Arab Emirates. I see nobody else. Please, floor is yours.
شكرا سيد الرئيس، وأعتذر من طلب الكلمة أثناء في هذا التوقيت، وقد كنت حريص أن أكتفي بما أورده المتحدث من قبلنا في هذا الموضوع الهام، إلى جانب أننا كنا من أوائل من تحدثوا في هذه المسألة في العلاقة مع الجهات الاستشارية والاستفادة من الاستشارة المبكرة في أول يوم من هذه الدورة. ولكننا سعداء أولا بهذا التقرير، ونشكر مركز التراث العالمي على هذا الجهد الطيب وهذه الفرصة لهذا الحوار. ولن نطيل عليكم، يعني احنا نثني على معظم ما أشارت به وفود الدول الأطراف. فقط نريد أن نؤكد أننا عندما نتكلم لا نتكلم عن مشكلة لدولة بعينها أو فيما يخصنا نحن. نحن في المنطقة العربية وفي الخليج بدأنا علاقة تعاون مثمرة مع بعض الجهات الهيئات الاستشارية، ونحظى بتعاون إيجابي مع مركز التراث العالمي. لكن هذه هي بدايات هذا التعاون، وعندما نتكلم هنا نحن نؤيد المطالب التي طرحت من قبل بقية الدول والأقاليم، ونرى أن هذا الاستشعار بهذه الأهمية هي بداية، هي مسألة صحية، ونؤمن بأنها ستؤتي ثمارها. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you very much. So, Barbados, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think Barbados is very much in agreement with a number of points that have already been raised. We did not take the floor on items 13, 12A or 12B. Primarily, these are interlinked in our mind with what we are now discussing. And also because we are quite delighted to see the progress being made in a number of issues which Barbados has raised over the last few years while on the committee. Most particularly, however, we are very much in support of the perspective articulated by Estonia in their last two interventions, as we have done in other interventions during the last debates. There are, however, 2 or 3 points which we have not heard mentioned in this debate, which we'd like to bring to the table for your consideration. And firstly, in terms of establishing the potential for OUV of a particular site, we feel that more should be done to stress the importance of the comparative analysis. Some states parties, and indeed their experts, are often not aware of the importance or value of this mechanism to assist in the process. I remember being really looked at very sternly by my delegation because I insisted we start with the comparative analysis first and determine whether or not we could identify outstanding universal value. But this is not the way in which the operational guidelines are articulated. Don't give any particular precedence or don't assert a particular order in which you prepare aspects of the nomination. But I think it may well be useful guidance for those who are not experienced in this area. The second point I would like to raise is the importance of recognizing the relevance of bilateral or group support. We do recognize it obviously in terms of the regional workshops that are organized, as illustrated with a number of the activities that have already been raised. But this is the World Heritage Convention, and yet until recently, with the start of the upstream processes, states parties involved in the development of their nominations felt or were pretty much left isolated, or at least felt themselves to be so. The operational guidelines and several other papers and decisions which you have moved forward at this meeting and at previous meetings are silent on the possibility of a state party calling on another which has had experience in this area. We do, I think, take the time to recognize, obviously, the generous financial and technical support that are offered by those delegations that can afford to do so. Barbados cannot give money, but like a number of other delegations, we can give technical support. And yet the discussion and debates, the papers, the plans, the strategies that are rolled out are silent on the possibility of intergovernmental or inter-delegation support for each other. I think this is an opportunity we are missing. The advisory bodies have been clear on their great willingness and commitment to assist state parties in whatever way they can within the limited resources available. But they also recall their status as advisory to the committee and not necessarily directly to the state party involved in this process. And it's a delicate balance that they walk on each and every occasion, in which I think a number of us very much appreciate. But I would like us to bring to the table the mechanism which has been outlined of the mentoring aspect that has been raised in other areas, which I am very heartened to see has started with such positive results so far with the recent regional workshop that has occurred in Jamaica. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that you touched a very important point or very important problem of intergovernmental or the cooperation between different countries, but it seems to me this cooperation exists, of course exists. I know the only examples of Russia when Germany gave us the experts and we worked on some properties. And I suppose that many examples like this exist, but you know, I agree with you that it's necessary maybe to strengthen this interstate cooperation and not only appeal to the advisory bodies, which has limited resources, limited possibility to send maybe people. So Kenya, floor is yours. And it will be the last speaker, and we move just to the draft decision. Kenya, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we want to comment on this particular topic because we think it's of absolute importance to us. We feel that the upstream processes in the nomination has great potential, not only for increasing the list, the number of sites listed, but basically also addressing the global strategy on the representativity of the regions. We would like to give a good example, which is the nomination dossier training exercise. We do see this as an upstream process, because here we bring in our region different state parties, managers and professionals, and we give them training in the nomination dossier development. And IUCN, ICROM, and ICOMOS have been involved. And it does not necessarily mean that they are writing this. It's a process of training. And so that is one way that probably we should look at it. And I think Barbados has just alluded to that. Now, one thing that the ICOMOS has mentioned is the issue of conflict of interest. I think that in developing this process, we need to manage the expectations of the state parties, because I think it's very dangerous to work with the state parties for years, and at the end of the day, you say, oh, you come back and judge and say, this nomination is not qualified. So I think that does create a problem. But I think, done well, there is no reason why state parties should not be advised that nomination is not going to make it because it does not have outstanding universal value, rather than waiting until the last minute. We also want to touch on the issue of fundraising. We note that most of these case studies that were chosen really have not taken off, because nobody knows who is supposed to raise the funds. It's very vague. Sometimes you think it's the state party. Sometimes they mention that you can raise, you can actually, work together and raise these funds. There are expectations sometimes where the state party is expected to, provide this funding. And as one of the mentors in the continent of Africa, the state party of Nigeria actually invited us to go there in December last year. And we went there and we looked at the Kano, Idanre, and another extra site. And we were going on our own capacity as the trainers of the nomination dossier and mentors in Africa. We do not see the reason why the advisory bodies and the center and the state parties cannot sit together and work out mechanisms of raising funds. I think the state party should also be ready to contribute something if they are willing if they are really serious with their nomination. Lastly is the issue of the focal point. Now, it's not very clear whether the focal point is an individual or the focal point is an institution. We would suggest that in such cases, we think that institutions work better than individuals, because it's not proper to mention that we were given a focal point and since that time nothing else has happened. We think that is not good enough. But we want to say that we fully support this process. We think that it has potential, and we feel that the committee should really dedicate itself, look at it properly, and ensure that there are different ways in which this particular process is moved on, including the training and development capacity in the nomination dossier development. And with this also, we want to thank the African Wallery Fund that has been very strategic and has ensured that we are able to work on this particular area, and other regions may be able to borrow from that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that we have large and very good and clear discussion. I didn't stop even nobody because I had to within our rules of procedure, especially our observers. They have only 1 minute in accordance with our rules of procedure. So now I propose straight go to the draft decision, which is contained in the part 3 of the document, 36-Com-12C. Reporter, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. You have to adopt the draft decision 36-Com-12C, which is which contains 6 paragraphs. So far, we have not received any amendments to this proposal, Madam Chairperson, so you may want to proceed to approve the decision as a whole.
So I see no objection. Senegal, you have some amendments to the decision, or what? We close the discussion. Yes, please.
Approuve. Vous avez mis toutes les actions. Or, dans le document, il est dit que certaines actions n'ont pas abouti. Donc, approuve les actions pertinentes réalisées, simplement, je voulais dire.
I suppose that it's not the matter to discuss. Are you agree to take off all or tout? I see no objection, so maybe maybe consider the decision 36-12 as some literature amendment adopted. So I see no objection. It is adopted. Dear colleagues, so our agenda for today and even half of tomorrow is ended. But we still didn't close item 5B. And I would like to hear clarification. As you remember, we couldn't agree on the draft decision. We asked, our colleagues to organize the working group to elaborate and to give us the final decision. It was Colombia, it was Mexico, as I remember. So where is the decision? Who can respond? Switzerland, please.
Madame la Présidente, excusez-moi, il a été très difficile de mettre sur pied un groupe de travail. Il n'y a pas eu de groupe de travail, en fait, dans le sens classique du terme, qui est discuté d'un projet de décision. Il y a eu des discussions de couloir et il y a eu un dîner qui a été organisé par la Colombie et puisque Madame l'ambassadeur de Colombie n'est pas là, je me permets de prendre la parole en étant en quelque sorte le co-sponsor, si je puis dire ainsi, de ce dîner. Ce dîner qui a réuni un certain nombre de personnes et de représentants qui voulaient venir et qui avaient montré de l'intérêt à cette question, a permis, et c'était ça son objectif, je dirais de mettre les cartes sur la table après avoir eu l'impression qu'il y avait un certain nombre de problèmes qui étaient posés quant à des liens, je dirais, quant à le contact entre les États parties, entre le comité et les organisations consultatives. La discussion a duré grosso modo 2 heures. Et je crois que chacun a pu dire ce qu'il avait sur le cœur. Cette discussion a eu lieu selon les règles très connues de Chatham House, c'est-à-dire que chacun a parlé de ce qu'il avait sur le cœur et tous les autres en ont pris bonne note sans que cela ne soit disséminé à droite et à gauche. Néanmoins, j'ai eu le plaisir de constater que, je dirais, ce système de discussion ouverte, totalement informelle, a permis de dissiper un très grand nombre de malentendus. En tout cas, c'est la façon dont moi j'ai vu les choses. Je ne sais pas si ceux qui étaient présents seront d'accord avec moi, mais voilà. J'ai eu, en tant que président du groupe de travail sur les orientations, le sentiment que quand nous avons discuté, comme je vous l'ai expliqué ce matin, par la bande, un tout petit peu sur les questions connexes, pas directement liées, bien entendu, aux orientations et au travail que nous avions, il y avait déjà une meilleure compréhension. J'ai eu l'impression que tout à l'heure, lorsque nous avons discuté du point 12C, par exemple, également un certain nombre d'idées sont venues, notamment de la bouche aussi des représentants des organisations consultatives. Je pense qu'il y a là un terreau sur lequel on peut construire, sur lequel on peut bâtir quelque chose. Je crois qu'il ne faut pas mettre, Madame la Présidente, la charrue avant les bœufs. C'est difficile, sur cette base-là seulement, de faire comment dirais-je, un projet de décision qui aille dans les détails. Mais je crois que cette discussion a permis de mettre certains points sur les i, et je crois que c'était son but, et je crois que le but a été atteint. Je ne sais pas comment vous allez procéder, Madame la Présidente. Je pense que ce que je vous ai dit ne vous satisfera pas entièrement. Je le regrette, je sais. Nous n'avons pas rempli, en fait, la tâche que vous nous avez donnée, mais nous avons pris le problème par un autre bout. Et je crois que dans les circonstances actuelles, c'était peut-être, à mon sens en tout cas, la meilleure façon de procéder. Voilà ce que j'avais à dire à ce stade. Merci pour votre compréhension, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much for your very clear explication. It seems to me that we, within the points of this day, like operational guidelines and future of the convention and decision-making processes of statutory organs, we very deeply discussed all these questions. We understand that these processes is not possible only decide and go ahead, because we see that some problems exist. It's necessary that these problems have been discussed. It's necessary maybe to have some kind of consensus, understanding between the member states. So it seems to me maybe taking in mind that we make the decisions on the other points, which is connected completely with this particular point 5b, maybe not to change anything and adopt like it is, so like general, take notes and welcomes harmonization. So that's all. So we are still, because I'm not sure that we can put here some concrete proposals. If you agree, so we straight go to the draft decision. Agree. So, Rapporteur, please take the floor.
Yes, Madam Chairperson. So basically, the committee needs to approve decision 36.5b, which is in the screen now, and which includes 4 paragraphs.
Thank you very much. I propose to adopt the decision 36.5b. Are any objections? I see none, so adopted. So, South Africa, excuse me.
Madam Chair, it's not about, I think we are correct to adopt. But the issue is what His Excellency from Switzerland raised. I see the challenge here is how we discuss issues, because there's a modus operandi that we seem to be all unhappy about, or raising issues. Even the advisory bodies articulated their frustrations. But perhaps what we need is one document that might combine issues of 5B and issues of 12C to say, how do we move forward in that consolidated report flagging issues? Because on each item, we seem to have a trend of, I don't want to call unhappiness, a trend of concerns by all involved in the convention. Advisory bodies, the center, plus the committee members. Perhaps we need a document that reflects the concerns that we can perhaps discuss or reflect in the next session, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I hope that the discussion we will have even in the process of the next year, because we thought that maybe to organize maybe informal even working group, which can suggest something valuable for the next session of the World Heritage Committee. Dear colleagues, for the moment, I announce the session closed. Please switch off the web translation because it's over. And then still here, stay here, I will make the announcement and put some questions. So today I want to remind you that we at 8 o'clock have a video conference with Kazan with the Youth Forum. It will be in very interesting library in the old, building in the presidential library. At 8 o'clock sharp it starts because it's video conference. So the buses will go from here at 7 p.m. But we will be there in two groups. Members of the committee will be directly in one premises with the screens, and the not members of the committee will be in another with possibility to see what is going on, because and then it will be dinner afterwards take place there. I would remind you that you had the invitations. If, for example, but don't forget your badges, even try to take the invitation too, but if not, even not forget your badges, because without these documents it will be difficult to pass. And then I would like to consult with you. So we have item 15, it's presentation of final accounts of the World Heritage Fund, which is budget, and it's, as I understand, it will be ready only tomorrow, let's say at 12 o'clock, or maybe a little bit later. Then we have item 12D, celebration of the 40th anniversary of the convention. We are still waiting the person from Japan who has to come. And then we have other businesses, election of chairperson, vice chairperson, reporter, so the end of the provisional agenda of the next session. I would like to ask you, maybe we start tomorrow after lunch at 3 o'clock, because all these items we can take in one. What do you think? It seems to me it would be the best decision not to divide like this. So I hope that this budget working group that Mr. Rao is afraid that we will have very big discussion on budget. But budget is budget. It's possible to discuss very long, but money will not increase amount of money of this. So we take in mind that it will be working group, and so I propose like this. If you have nothing against, so let's do like this. It will be more rational than to divide to short, session in the morning than short session in the evening. What do you think? Agree that we start tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. So, and one more.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's exactly on the budget. Now, the budget group is meeting tonight in half an hour, 5:45, in the library room. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dear colleagues, I have, Mr. Rao is in any case is very nervous. He asked that we met at 2 o'clock, Maybe it's okay? At 2 o'clock, so tomorrow. So we are waiting. We have to meet at 8 o'clock sharp in library, please. In presidential library, not in this library. And buses will start from here at 7 o'clock. Dear colleagues, Bureau, tomorrow it seems to me that we discussed everything today, and it's not foreseen at 9:30 the Bureau meeting.